Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. Welcome. I'm going to start off today by laying the groundwork a little bit for you. We'll hop into a meditation in just a moment, but the first thing I want to say is that today's episode will be all about the word liminal, and liminal, that space of the in-between, neither here nor there. And liminal is the first word in a series that I'm going to be doing in a deep dive and a focus on these podcast episodes, focusing on the particular power that certain words have. There are sometimes just words that reach out to me when I read them on a page or when I hear people speak of them, and those words stick with me. So this will be one of a series of, I think, 8 words that we'll be going into. And I thought, what better way to start than liminal, this space in between. It's a word that you might be familiar with, you may not be familiar with it. And so I want to start with laying the groundwork a little bit before we go into the meditation. Think back to being a teenager. Puberty was probably one of the first major liminal spaces that you experienced. You weren't a child anymore, but you also weren't yet an adult. Your body was changing before you fully understood how to inhabit it or how to fully make use of these new spaces that your body had created. The world was seeing you differently, even though you might have felt like the same person on the inside. And everything about that liminal space of puberty was uncomfortable. Just like puberty, all liminal spaces are marked by discomfort, uncertainty, and an inability to rush through them. You have to take your time. You have to allow the liminal space to happen. You can't force it or make it end. Liminality is the space between identities and roles and ways of being. It is truly the caterpillar inside the cocoon, the in-between place before something new emerges and before the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. It's that stage where there's just goo. There's really no form yet. So with that in mind, I invite you to close your eyes or focus on something ahead of you in a soft gaze. Taking a deep breath in and out, breathing into the space in between, wherever you notice that there's room in your body, in your mind. As you take an inhale, notice the pause that happens before you take an exhale. And with every exhale, noticing the pause before you take an inhale. This is the liminal space. This is the space in between. Notice as you breathe in and out, and you take those pauses between your inhales and your exhales. What happens for you in the space between? Can you soften in those spaces between the breath? Can you allow just a little bit of time and space from one inhale before you release the breath and exhale? Allowing this space, these inhales and exhales, to have their own time, their own space as you breathe in and out, remembering the dark, the light, the comfort, and the discomfort of your in-between spaces. Whether everything in your life now feels flowing and aligned, or whether there are times and spaces where you do not know what comes next. Can you allow whatever is there to be there? And with that in mind, coming back to this present moment, opening your eyes or releasing your fixed gaze and being here in the liminal with me now. In my own life, I feel as if I am in this cocoon, in this in-between phase right now. I'm close to the end of my supervision hours for my therapy license, as I've talked about. And I know that I want my work to shift, but I'm not at the end, so I can't quite act. I haven't fully closed one door, so I'm not ready to yet walk through another door. We don't often acknowledge how deeply unsettling this space in between can be. Modern life is often pushing us to have a plan, to know the next step, to keep moving forward. But what if there's wisdom in staying here, in being with that uncertainty? So this episode is going to pull in some resources that I have found to help me balance out and work through and move through the liminal spaces in my life. I'm going to reference, I think, 6 different books. Some of these books or authors I have actually talked about in other episodes, but we'll bring them back around. And I just want to integrate a little bit of the wisdom that I've learned from these resources in my life and share them with you. Maybe you'll read the book, maybe you won't. It doesn't actually really matter. So the first concept of the liminal is the discomfort of the in-between. So one of the hardest things about liminality is that we are wired to want certainty, to know whether something is safe, unsafe, true, untrue. We crave knowing what is next, having a clear direction, and feeling like we're in control. But liminal spaces do not offer clear direction or control. They demand that we sit with the unknown. And that is so incredibly uncomfortable. I was talking with someone over the last weekend about my need to have a plan, to know what's coming next, and to have some false or real sense of control that comes from knowing what the plan is next. And right now in my life, in many ways, I do not know what the plan is for the future, or what will happen with certainty. And the reality is that we never actually know. We can get a major health diagnosis. We can have a health crisis. We can lose our home in a fire. We can have all of these different things happen to us, and that can completely take away any illusion of control or a plan that we have. And all we can do in those moments, in those spaces, is allow and to sit with that discomfort. So Sue Monk Kidd, one of my favorite authors in The Dance of the Dissident Daughter, talks about transformation as being more of a process of unlearning than learning. And I think this leans so much into the discomfort of the in-between, because we almost have to unlearn our systems and our safety and our plans in order to be with the liminal space and that discomfort. In that book, she says, transformation is often more about unlearning than learning, which makes the process all the more challenging. So for me right now, I am definitely in the process of unlearning old ways of working and old ways of living, but I don't yet know what the new version will look like. I know that for the way I work with people, I want to create my own playbook, to decide for myself what I want that to look like without the structure and the restrictions of ethical boards or licensing boards. And being in that place of not knowing exactly what something's going to look like, but knowing that you want it to be different, is just really scary. Another book that I found speaks to the discomfort that comes with the uncertainty is from Stephanie Fu, from her book, What My Bones Know. And that book really shows that healing and transformation are not linear. We often think of our healing or paths in our life as a straight path and something that we move toward. We just keep moving forward. But really, healing and transformation in life itself is much more like a spiral. We're revisiting the same struggles, the same fears, and we're just revisiting and learning them again in new ways. So in her book, Stephanie Fu says, maybe healing isn't about moving forward. Maybe it's about allowing yourself to be where you are. And frankly, this is something that in the liminal space I've been struggling with, and that I see a lot of people struggle with, is that urge to push forward, to face clarity, rather than allowing yourself to just be in this space. So right now, interestingly, I have several people that I'm working with who are in the midst of or just out of a divorce. And a divorce, just like puberty, is another liminal space. You're in between. Engagement and before marriage is the liminal space from girlfriend, boyfriend to marriage, and that's uncomfortable and brings up a lot for people. But divorce is the space between marriage and singledom. And I'm seeing in people this discomfort with what their newfound freedom and aloneness, their singlehood, means to them. And I'm seeing so many people jumping into dating before their bodies and their minds are actually really ready for it. And so I continue to encourage them to explore, what does it look like to actually just be alone for a while? What does it look like to not seek out what comes next, what next partner or person or this version of yourself that you'll become? What if you can just let yourself learn yourself again? So there you have that, the discomfort. The next thing in the liminal is the wisdom of the liminal. Ancient wisdom teaches us that liminal spaces are sacred. They are the spaces where we're taken apart and we're put back together in a new way. But our culture does not teach us how to navigate these spaces. We are, just as I was mentioning, taught to rush through them, to make a decision, to figure it out, to see what's next. But instead, what if we honored the in-between? And there are 3 books in the wisdom of the liminal that I definitely have to mention here and talk about. So this honoring the in-between. Thomas More in Dark Nights of the Soul describes the dark night, this liminal space, as a period of profound transformation. It's not something to be feared. It's something that we will live through again and again, potentially. In Dark Nights of the Soul, Thomas More says, we all have to be taken apart to be put back together in a new way. So my question for you, if a liminal space is coming up for you now, is what if, instead of resisting this space, we trusted that we're being reshaped into something new? I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you've gone through. You could be like me in the midst of infertility or career changes. You could be going through divorce or the end of a relationship. You could be moving homes or spaces. You could be going into these liminal spaces in a variety of ways in your life. So what if you trusted, instead of insisting that the next has to be here or being so uncomfortable, you just trusted that whatever is happening now was reshaping you into something new that you don't know yet? The second book that talks about the wisdom of this liminal space is Megan Watterson. Her book, Reveal, A Secret Manual for Getting Spiritually Naked, is such a beautiful book and was really meaningful for me in so many ways. But in that book, she talks about surrender, how our transformation isn't about pushing, but instead about allowing. That is something that is so hard to do. So I've said the word allow multiple times already. And what do we mean by that? I mean, really not forcing what is next, not forcing a decision to be made, because I think that's sometimes where we get in trouble in these liminal spaces, is that we will think we have to make a decision. We'll think we have to decide on something. And sure, if your lease is coming to an end and you know that you need to move for one reason or another, you will have to make a decision. But actually, I'm going to challenge that. What if you don't? What if you can wait one more month? What if you can wait one more day, one more week, and just give yourself time? Or before you make that decision, if you can't wait, what if you actually give yourself space and quiet to sit with what decision feels right for you, to allow the wisdom to come through? So in her book, Megan Watterson has this quote: what if instead of trying to become, we allowed ourselves to unfold? This message resonates so deeply for me. This idea that I don't have to force change. I just have to allow it to happen. And what that allowance requires of us is it requires surrender. It requires us to acknowledge that we do not have all control and power over our lives. We have a lot. We do. We get to make choices. We get to do things. We get to decide and let go of things that aren't serving us anymore. But we also have to surrender to outcomes that could change us. Another book is Salika Jawad's Between Two Kingdoms. Her beautiful memoir is about living between two worlds, between illness and healing, and really who she was before her cancer diagnosis and her treatment, and then who she became after that. She says in her book, "It is in the waiting, the not knowing, that life happens." This to me speaks to how liminality and those liminal spaces aren't just a waiting room. They are a space where life really is happening, even if we can't see it. And I think for me, just from what I've experienced, I haven't experienced a cancer diagnosis. I have experienced 8 or 9 years now of fertility treatments and this in-between space of who I was before going through that, and all the precautions and the hopes and the belief that you just easily get pregnant, and so you have to actually prevent it. And I'm still in that liminal space before I know what comes next after, either accepting that I won't have a biological child or having one, and what that means, what that space brings in the waiting. But the space, the waiting room that I have experienced besides that we have all experienced, is puberty. And that space, it feels like simultaneously so much is happening and also nothing is happening, because you're not yet at the finish line. You're not yet, graduated from high school or in college and in relationships. You're just in this mushy state. And we don't realize that actually those few years, those 3 to 5 years, are so important, because that is when our body is becoming what it will be in our adult phase. That is where our brain is developing. That's where so much is happening. And yet we can't wait to get out of it because it is so effing uncomfortable. So there you have it. What if you just allow? What if you just surrender? What if you just let yourself wait in the wisdom of the liminal? So the last kind of big piece of liminal is really accepting the threshold, I'll call it. There's a moment in every transformation where you realize you can't go back, but you also can't see what's ahead. When you look over your shoulder, you see what's behind you, but you're not able to retreat or pull back to that. But what's in front of you is misty and foggy and unclear. And that's the true threshold where you have to surrender. The moment where you can choose to fight without cause, or the moment where you can go, okay, I surrender, I allow, whatever will come next. So Sarah Durham Wilson, in her book From Maiden to Mother, talks about this transition, about how it really shouldn't be focused on reaching a destination. It's about the process of becoming. She says in that book, "We are called to walk through the fire, not knowing what is on the other side, but trusting that we will emerge transformed." So this quote is really that idea of the phoenix rising from the ashes, of believing that whatever fire burns you, whatever state, whatever mushiness you feel in this in-between, that you will come through it on the other side, that you will be something else. And this is something that I am reminding myself of on the daily, something that I'm holding on to so closely right now. The idea that I don't actually need to see what's on the other side to trust that I am moving towards something meaningful. So in my businesses, in both my therapy practice and with Happy Rebel, I don't know how they're going to come together. I don't know what that's going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years. But I do know I have this inkling, I have this seed of intuition and knowledge that there will be some way that those two worlds weave so beautifully together, and that they will come together and make sense and be partners side by side. even though I have no idea what that's going to look like. And isn't that crazy? That you can know and believe that you'll be okay and that you'll trust, and also have no idea how the F you'll get there. I'm saying F because I'm actually trying to reduce my swearing in life. So maybe I should say, instead of how the F you'll get there, maybe I should say just not knowing how you'll get there. Okay, the last book I'm going to mention is Sue Monk Kidd, The Secret Life of Bees. So love Sue Monk Kidd, can't help it. Her books are incredible. So in this novel, the main character, Lily, really has to sit in this unknown space and trust that change is happening without knowing what it's going to be. She says in the book, there's a quote, "Change is never easy. It is wrought with loss and possibility at once. This is the heart of the liminal, of liminality. You are holding both loss of what things have been, of what you've had, of who you've been, of how things have been, of where you've lived, of your health. And you're also holding the possibility of what could be at the same time." So Carl Jung, the great father of psychoanalysis, he talks about the tension of opposites. And I talk about this with people all the time. The idea of holding two things at once that do not feel like they could possibly exist at the same time. For example, light and dark. It's hard to imagine that they can both exist at the same time. But they can. They're always there together, side by side. This is the place of acceptance, the threshold, the moment that you can't go back, even if you don't know what is ahead and what's forward in the liminal space. The essential thing, the essential part of the liminal is really trusting the in-between. The hardest thing about liminality is trusting that it is leading us somewhere, that even when we can't see the path ahead, that we are still on the path. The liminal space is not comfortable, but it's necessary. It's the space where transformation happens. So what if instead of resisting the liminal, the unknown, what if we honored it? So I invite you to reflect on, what liminal space are you in right now? Are there any areas of your life, whether it's your health and body, your sense of adventure, your business, your personal growth, your finances and money, where you're at with your spirituality, where you're at in your relationship, either with friends or family or a love? Are you in a liminal space in between who you've been and who you want to be anywhere right now? And in that liminal space, can you trust that even without clarity, you are still becoming? Maybe transformation isn't something we make happen or we force. Maybe it's something we allow to happen. Okay, before I hop off, I just want to share one last thing. I actually have this pillow. I've had a pillow for about 2 years that has some artwork by the artist Morgan Harper Nichols on it, and I just love her. And this pillow has a simple little design, and it says, "Keep becoming" on it. And this pillow that I keep in my office is my reminder to keep going, to remember that we are always becoming. We're never done. We're never complete. And in my belief system, we're even never complete after we die, that there's something that continues, that our energy just goes on and on. We keep becoming. And really, that's where I find the space in the liminal, is that it's not at a standstill, even if we're in between jobs, relationships, financial stability, even if we're in between those moments, that we're still moving forward, that we're still becoming. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.